The skies over Beijing burned red. Not from the sunset, but from the fires that consumed what remained of Earth's greatest cities. Ambassador Chen Wei stood in the command bunker beneath what used to be the United Nations headquarters, watching the tactical display with hollow eyes. Every red dot represented a dead city. Every flickering signal meant millions of lives going dark. "Sir, Sydney just went offline," a young officer reported, her voice breaking. That's the last of the Southern Hemisphere defense grid." Chen Wei nodded slowly. He was 53 years old, and in the past 72 hours he had aged a decade. The Xthari swarm had arrived without warning, without communication, without mercy. Their ships had appeared in Earth's orbit like a plague of locusts, blotting out the stars. Humanity's combined military forces had thrown everything at them: nuclear missiles, railguns, laser batteries, everything humanity had spent centuries developing. Nothing worked. The swarm simply absorbed the attacks and kept coming. "How long until they breach the bunker?" Chen asked. The officer checked her console. 18 minutes, sir, maybe 20 if we're lucky." Lucky? Chen almost laughed at the word. There was no luck left for humanity. In 3 days, the Xthari had reduced Earth's population from 9 billion to less than 2 billion. The other colonies, Mars, Europa, Titan, had gone silent within the first 6 hours. Humanity was dying, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. "Sir," another officer shouted, her eyes wide, "we're detecting new signatures, dozens of them appearing at the edge of the solar system." Chen felt his heart sink further. More of them. Of course. The swarm wanted to make sure humanity was completely exterminated. But then the officer's expression changed. "Sir, these ships, they're not Xthari. They're firing on the swarm." The command center erupted in confused shouts and frantic activity. Chen pushed his way to the main display and stared. New ships had indeed appeared, and they were unlike anything in human records. Elegant vessels that seemed to shimmer with impossible colors, moving with grace that defied physics. And they were destroying the swarm. Energy weapons unlike anything humanity had ever seen cut through the Xthari ships like a hot knife through butter. The swarm vessels that had shrugged off humanity's nuclear weapons were being torn apart. Within minutes, the skies over Earth began to clear. The burning city still smoldered, but the attack had stopped. "We're receiving a transmission," the communications officer stammered. "Audio and visual. They're speaking English." "Put it through," Chen ordered. The main screen flickered, and a face appeared. It was humanoid but clearly alien. Tall, with skin that seemed to shift between blue and silver, large eyes that held wisdom and kindness, and features that reminded Chen of classical sculptures. Beautiful and serene. "People of Earth," the being spoke, its voice melodious and sad. "I am High Chancellor Vormus of the Velkara Confederacy. We detected the Xthari incursion into your system. We are deeply sorry we did not arrive sooner. We have driven them away, but—" The Chancellor paused, and Chen saw genuine sorrow in those alien eyes. "But the damage to your world is severe. Your species stands on the edge of extinction. We offer you our protection, our aid, and a place in the galactic community. You need not face the darkness alone anymore." Chen Wei felt tears rolling down his face. Around him, the command center had gone silent. Then someone started crying, and then someone else, and within moments the entire bunker was filled with the sounds of humanity's relief and grief mixing together. The Velkara ships descended to Earth like angels. They brought medical technology that seemed like magic, healing the wounded with devices that knit flesh and bone back together. They brought food synthesizers that fed the starving billions. They brought construction equipment that rebuilt in days what would have taken humans years. But more than that, they brought hope. 6 months after the attack, Chen Wei stood in the new assembly hall on the outskirts of what used to be Geneva. The Velkara had rebuilt it first, saying that humanity would need a place to gather and heal. He was no longer just an ambassador. He had been elected as humanity's primary representative to the Velkara Confederacy. High Chancellor Vormes stood before him, along with representatives from a dozen other species. The Cathar, who looked like crystalline beings made of living gemstone. The Drovak, massive creatures covered in fur and kindness. The Solari, beings of pure energy contained in humanoid forms. And others, species Chen was still learning about. The Treaty of Preservation, Vormis said gently, holding up a holographic document that glowed with soft light. It is our standard agreement for species who join the Confederacy under protection status. We understand this is a difficult time, and we do not wish to pressure you, but the galaxy is dangerous. The Xthari are not the only threat in the darkness. Chen read through the treaty, his staff and advisors around him doing the same. The terms were clear and, on the surface, generous. Humanity would be given a new world, a planet called Kepler 442b by human designation, to be renamed New Terra. The Velkara would terraform it, making it perfect for human habitation. They would provide technology, education, and resources. They would protect humanity from any external threats. In exchange, humanity would accept certain limitations. They could develop civilian technology freely, but military technology would be restricted. Nothing beyond basic system defense. No weapons capable of destroying planets. No fleets larger than what was needed for patrol and police duties. Humanity would be members of the Confederacy, but junior members, protected, but not equal. It's for your own good, Vormis explained, his tone kindly. Young species often destroy themselves with weapons they are not ready to wield. We have seen it happen too many times. The Confederacy has stood for 20,000 years because we limit military development to only the most mature species. You will be safe, and in time, perhaps a few thousand years when your species has matured, these restrictions can be lifted. Chen looked at his advisors. They all wore the same expression. What choice did they have? Earth was a ruin. 2 billion survivors couldn't rebuild a civilization that could defend itself, not against threats like the Xthari. Without the Velkara, humanity would die. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. We accept, Chen said, his voice steady. And we thank you for your mercy. Vormis smiled warmly. The Confederacy protects its own. Welcome to the family of civilized species, humanity. The treaty was signed. Humanity's fate was sealed. The colony ships were magnificent. The Velkara had provided transport for all of Earth's survivors, along with genetic samples and cultural archives of everything humanity had ever created. The journey to New Terra took 3 months, but it felt like traveling in a luxury cruise ship rather than a refugee convoy. Young Captain Sarah Okonkwo walked through the observation deck of the transport ship Horizon, watching the stars stream by at faster-than-light speeds. She was 28 years old, one of the youngest survivors of Earth's defense fleet. She had watched her entire squadron die fighting the Xthari, their weapons barely scratching the enemy ships. Beautiful, isn't it? A voice said beside her. Sarah turned to see a Velkara standing there. This one was younger than the Chancellor, with skin that shimmered more green than blue. Yes, she admitted. I've never seen FTL travel before. Our ships could barely reach Mars in a reasonable time. I am Kelvar, the alien said. I am a cultural liaison. I help new species adapt to Confederacy life. You are Captain Okonkwo, yes? One of your military officers? Former military officer, Sarah corrected. There's not much military left to be an officer of. Kelvar's expression became sad. I am sorry for your loss. The Xthari are a great evil. We have fought them for millennia. They destroyed 3 species before we learned how to drive them back. But you didn't destroy them? Sarah asked. No, Kelvar admitted. The Confederacy's principles do not permit genocide even against a species like the Swarm. We contain them, drive them back to their home regions, and guard against their return. It is not perfect, but it preserves our moral integrity. Sarah bit back her first response. Moral integrity hadn't saved Earth, but these people had saved what was left of humanity, so she kept her thoughts to herself. New Terra was paradise. The Velkara had not lied about that. The planet was slightly larger than Earth, with vast oceans and continents covered in forests and plains. The air was clean, the water pure. The Velkara had even adjusted the day-night cycle to match Earth's 24 hours. and seeded the planet with Earth-compatible plants and animals cloned from the genetic archives. 2 billion humans spread out across a world that could support 10 billion. There was room to breathe, to build, to grow, but there were rules. The Confederacy overseers were kind but firm. Humans could build cities, but only according to approved environmental plans. They could develop technology, but any research into weapons or military systems was prohibited. Velkara inspectors had access to all human facilities, all human communications, all human activities. For their protection, they were told. Sarah became captain of the New Terra Defense Force, one of 20 small patrol ships humanity was permitted to operate. Her ship, the Resilience, was barely armed, enough to deal with pirates or natural disasters, but nothing that could threaten a real military vessel. The Velkara had provided the designs, approved every system, and maintained oversight of all operations. 50 years passed. Humanity rebuilt. The population grew slowly, reaching 3 billion by the 50th anniversary of the arrival, as humans called it. New Terra's cities gleamed with technology. Not all of it human-designed, much of it gifts or purchases from the Confederacy. Human children learned not just their own history, but galactic history. Learning of the dozens of species that made up the Confederacy, Ambassador Chen Wei was long retired, watching his grandchildren play in the gardens of New Terra's capital. His grandson Marcus had joined the Defense Force, following in the tradition of the Chen family. His granddaughter Lin was a researcher studying Velkara medical technology. But Chen Wei was old now, 83 years of age, kept alive by the Velkara medical advances that had doubled human lifespan. And sometimes, late at night, he wondered if humanity had made the right choice. They were safe. They were protected. But they were also pets. The galaxy viewed humanity as the saved species. When humans traveled to Confederacy worlds for trade or tourism, they were met with kindness and pity. Other species saw them as the poor creatures who had nearly gone extinct, now kept alive by Velkara charity. Some were genuinely kind, others were condescending, but none saw humans as equals. Captain Sarah Okonkwo, now 78 years old and still commanding the Resilience thanks to the same medical technology, sometimes felt the weight of it. Her ship patrolled New Terra's system, dealing with the occasional smuggler or lost freighter. Real threats? The Velkara fleet handled those, always arriving before human ships could even be called. One evening, she sat in her ready room reviewing old records from Earth, combat footage from the Xthari invasion. She had watched it 1,000 times, studying every moment, every tactic. What had the swarm done? How had they adapted? What weapons had worked, even slightly? It was against regulations to study military history too deeply. The Confederacy discouraged it, saying it was unhealthy for species to dwell on violence. But Sarah couldn't help herself. Something in her mind kept picking at a thought she couldn't quite voice. Humanity had been helpless against the Xthari because they had been unprepared. The Velkara had saved them because they were prepared. The difference between extinction and survival was knowledge and strength. And right now humanity had neither. Her door chimed. "Enter," she called. A young officer stepped in, Lieutenant Marcus Chen, grandson of the ambassador. He was 35, bright, and one of the best tactical minds in the Defense Force, which admittedly wasn't saying much given their limited scope. "Captain," he said, "I've been running some simulations, training scenarios. I wanted your opinion." "What kind of simulations?" Marcus hesitated. "Hypothetical defensive scenarios. If the Confederacy wasn't here, if we had to defend ourselves, I know it's not really necessary, but I wanted to understand our capabilities." Sarah looked at him for a long moment, then smiled slightly. "Show me." As Marcus pulled up his tactical displays, showing imaginary battles and defensive strategies, Sarah felt something stirring, a thought that had been growing in her mind for 50 years. Humanity had been given mercy when they were weak, but mercy that came with chains was still chains no matter how golden, and somewhere, in the depths of her military mind, Sarah Okonkwo began to wonder, what would it take for humanity to stand on their own again? Not as protected children, but as equals. The thought was treasonous. The thought was dangerous. The thought would not leave her alone. Outside her viewport, the stars shone bright and beautiful, and somewhere in that vast darkness, threats still lurked. The Velkara protected humanity from them, kept them safe and secure in their comfortable cage. But cages, no matter how comfortable, were still cages, and humanity had never been good at staying caged for long. The emergency beacon screamed across the Confederacy's communication network at exactly 0347 hours, New Terra Standard Time. In the command center of the Defense Force headquarters, alarms began wailing. Captain Sarah Okonkwo, now 80 years old but still sharp as the day she signed up, was on duty when the message came through. Captain, the communications officer's face had gone white. It's from the Velkara outer monitoring stations. The Xthari swarm. They're back. Sarah felt ice water flow through her veins. 52 years. 52 years since the swarm had nearly exterminated humanity. Reports had come in over the decades of skirmishes in far sectors, but nothing major. The Confederacy had assured everyone the swarm was contained. "Show me," she ordered. The tactical display lit up with data streaming in from across the Confederacy, and what Sarah saw made her breath catch. This wasn't a raid. This wasn't a skirmish. The Xthari were coming in numbers that made their attack on Earth look like a scouting party. Entire star systems were going dark. The Kithar homeworld gone. The Drovak colonies silent. The outer rim of Confederacy space was collapsing like dominoes, and the swarm was accelerating, moving toward the core worlds with terrifying speed. Within 3 hours, Ambassador Chen Lin, granddaughter of the original ambassador, was summoned to the Confederacy Council. She took a shuttle to the orbital station where the council met, her mind racing. The young woman was 40 years old, smart, and had spent her entire life in diplomacy. But nothing had prepared her for what she saw when she entered the council chambers. Panic. The Confederacy representatives were in chaos. Chancellor Zelthar, who had inherited the position from Vormus 20 years ago, stood at the center trying to maintain order. But the calm, superior species who had protected humanity for 5 decades were terrified. "The swarm has evolved," Zelthar was saying, his voice strained. "They've developed new adaptation capabilities. Our weapons that worked before are less effective. They're learning faster than we can adjust." "How many worlds have been lost?" someone asked. 17 in the past week. 37 colonies. The death toll is estimated at 400 billion and rising. The number hung in the air like a physical weight. 400 billion. That was more than all of humanity's current population combined. Wiped out in a single week. Zelthar's eyes found Ambassador Chen. "Representative Chen, I am afraid we must discuss New Terra's evacuation procedures." The council chamber went quiet. Chen felt her stomach drop. "Evacuation? The swarm's trajectory suggests they will reach your sector within 2 months. We cannot guarantee New Terra's defense. We must evacuate all populations from the predicted attack zones and consolidate our forces for a defensive line at the core worlds." "You want us to run," Chen said flatly. "We want you to survive." Zelthar corrected gently. "We will provide transport for your entire population. We will find you a new world farther from the front lines. Humanity will be safe." "Safe," Chen repeated. She looked around the council at all the species who had spent 50 years telling humanity they were protected, that they didn't need weapons, that the Confederacy would keep them safe. And what about the species on those 17 worlds? Were they safe? Zelthar's expression became pained. "We did what we could. But the swarm's numbers are overwhelming. This is not like before. This is an extinction-level event for the entire Confederacy. We must be strategic." Chen looked at the Chancellor for a long moment. Then she tapped her communication device. "Get me Captain Okonkwo and Admiral Chen, secure channel." "Ambassador?" Zelthar asked, confused. "Give me 1 hour," Chen said. "Then I will give you humanity's answer." The meeting that followed in the secure human-only channel involved every major leader in human society. Captain Sarah Okonkwo participated from her ship. Admiral Marcus Chen, who now commanded the entire defense force, joined from his flagship. The governor of New Terra, the heads of industry, research, and education, all of them. "They want us to run," Ambassador Chen said without preamble. "The Velkara are abandoning the outer sectors. They want to evacuate us and pull back to a defensive line. And if we refuse?" Governor Richards asked. "Then we're on our own against the swarm," Sarah said. "Just like Earth was 52 years ago." "Not quite like Earth," a new voice said. Everyone turned to the holographic image of Dr. Yuki Tanaka, head of Human Research Division. The elderly woman smiled slightly. "We've been busy these past 50 years. Admiral Marcus Chen nodded slowly. "It's time then. Time to show them what we've been doing." Ambassador Chen looked at her cousin. Marcus, if we do this, there's no going back. The Velkar will see it as betrayal, breaking the treaty. The treaty was to keep us safe, Marcus replied. Right now they're admitting they can't keep us safe. The treaty's already broken. They just don't want to admit it. One by one, the human leaders voted. It was unanimous. Ambassador Chen returned to the council chamber exactly 1 hour later. Chancellor Zelthar and the other representatives waited expectantly. The Chancellor smiled kindly. We have prepared evacuation schedules. We can begin transporting your people within... No, Chen said simply. The chamber went silent. Zelthar blinked. I'm sorry? Humanity declines evacuation, Chen said clearly. We will not run. We will fight! The chamber erupted in shocked voices. Zelthar held up his hand for silence. Ambassador Chen, I understand this is emotional, but your species does not have the capability to fight the swarm. You have 20 patrol ships. The swarm has millions of vessels. We have more than 20 patrol ships, Chen said quietly. What? Chen tapped her device. The council chamber's main display switched to a new image. Space deep and dark. And then lights began to appear. Ships emerging from stealth fields and hidden asteroid bases. Hundreds of ships. Thousands of ships. They were unlike anything the Confederacy had seen. No elegant curves or aesthetic designs. These ships were brutal, functional, covered in armor plating and bristling with weapons. They looked like flying fortresses designed for one purpose only: war. For 50 years, Chen said into the stunned silence, humanity has rebuilt. You gave us technology and told us to develop our civilian sectors. We did, but you underestimated something fundamental about humanity. She looked directly at Chancellor Zelthar. We never forget. We never forget the day the swarm came to Earth. We never forget watching 9 billion people die. We never forget being helpless. And we swore, every single one of us, that we would never be helpless again. This is a violation of the Treaty of Preservation, one of the Cathar representatives shouted. You agreed to military limitations. We agreed not to develop weapons beyond basic system defense, Admiral Marcus Chen said, his image appearing on the display. And we haven't. Everything you see here is classified as defensive technology. We never built planet killers. We never built weapons of mass destruction. We built ships designed to defend our home and destroy anyone who tries to take it from us. This is semantics, Zelthar said, his calm finally breaking. You hid this from us. You lied. You never asked, Ambassador Chen said coldly. You assumed we were too grateful and too scared to think for ourselves. You saw us as children who needed constant supervision. You were wrong. Dr. Tanaka's image appeared. We studied every battle record in the Confederacy's archives that you gave us access to. We analyzed the swarm's tactics. We looked at every engagement between Confederacy forces and the ex-Thari over 10,000 years. And we found something interesting. The display shifted, showing battle analyses and tactical breakdowns. The Confederacy fights with elegance, Tanaka continued. Energy weapons, shields, evasion tactics. You've spent 20,000 years developing civilized warfare. But the swarm doesn't respond to civilized warfare. They respond to overwhelming force and tactics they can't predict. You've been fighting them the same way for millennia, and they've adapted to everything you do. Humanity hasn't fought the swarm for 50 years, Marcus added. We have no established patterns, no predictable tactics. We learned from you, but we're not you. We're something the swarm has never encountered before. A species that builds weapons not for elegance or honor, but for pure destructive efficiency. Captain Sarah Okonkwo's image joined the display. We're not asking for your approval, Chancellor. We're telling you what's going to happen. Humanity will stand and fight. We will defend New Terra. And we will show the swarm what happens when you nearly exterminate a species that knows how to hold a grudge. You'll be destroyed, Zelthar said, his voice almost pleading. The swarm will overwhelm you. Maybe, Sarah admitted, but we'll make them pay for every inch. And while we're fighting, we'll buy time for the Confederacy to reinforce their defensive lines. We'll be the anvil that slows the swarm's advance. This is madness, Zelthar whispered. This is war, Ambassador Chen replied. Real war. The kind the Confederacy has forgotten how to fight. You saved us 50 years ago because you were stronger. Now we're strong and we'll save you. Consider humanity's debt paid, Chancellor. She turned and walked out of the council chamber, leaving shocked silence behind her. The human fleet moved into position over the following weeks. 5,000 warships built in secret across dozens of hidden facilities. The Velkara watched in horror and fascination as humanity deployed weapon systems that violated every principle of civilized warfare. Kinetic bombardment weapons that accelerated asteroid-sized projectiles to near light speed. Nuclear minefields, electromagnetic pulse generators, chemical weapons designed to corrode swarm bioships, and something called Hellbore missiles, weapons that burrowed into enemy ships and detonated inside them. "They're monsters," one Velkara officer whispered, watching the tactical displays. "No," his commander replied quietly. "They're survivors, and there's nothing more dangerous than a survivor who's been pushed too far." The swarm arrived at New Terra's sector in exactly 43 days. The Xthari fleet numbered in the hundreds of thousands, a massive force that had already consumed a dozen worlds. They expected minimal resistance. The Confederacy had pulled back. Intelligence suggested only a small human presence remained. They were wrong. The first swarm ships entered the system and immediately encountered the outer defense perimeter. Thousands of automated weapons platforms opened fire, not with energy weapons that the swarm had adapted to, but with solid projectiles accelerated to incredible speeds. Swarm ships began exploding, unable to adapt fast enough to the simple kinetic impacts. The swarm adapted, adjusting their shields and armor. The attacks became less effective. But by then, the second wave hit, electromagnetic pulses that fried the swarm's bioelectrical systems. Ships went dark, drifting helplessly. The swarm adapted again, developing insulation, but that took time, and time was what the human strategy was built on. Keep changing tactics. Never let them settle. Never let them predict. The main swarm fleet pushed forward, meeting the human fleet in orbit around New Terra. The battle that followed was unlike anything the Confederacy had ever seen. Human ships didn't try to outmaneuver the swarm. They didn't engage in elegant dogfights. They moved in tight formations, concentrating fire on single targets, destroying them completely before moving to the next. When swarm ships closed to boarding range, human ships released swarms of their own, combat drones carrying explosives. When those didn't work, some human ships simply rammed swarm vessels, their crews ejecting in escape pods moments before impact. It was brutal. It was ruthless. It was effective. The swarm had numbers, but humanity had determination and tactics forged in desperation. Every human ship that fell took dozens of swarm vessels with it. The crews knew they might die, and they fought like it. Captain Sarah Okonkwo commanded the resilience in the thick of battle. Her small patrol ship, upgraded with weapons that would have made her Velkara overseers faint, danced through swarm formations, targeting weak points identified by the fleet's shared tactical network. "All ships focus fire on Sector 7-3. Marcus Chen's voice boomed across the command network. "Hit them where they're clustering. Don't let them coordinate." Sarah grinned fiercely. "You heard the Admiral. All power to forward weapons. Let's show these things what Earth's children learned." The battle lasted for 3 days. When it finally ended, the human fleet had lost 800 ships, but the swarm had lost over 30,000. The remaining swarm forces retreated, regrouping in the outer system. The Confederacy Council watched the battle recordings in stunned silence. They had never seen the swarm retreat before. Not from a single system, not from overwhelming force. Chancellor Zelthar sat down heavily, his elegant composure shattered. "They did it," he whispered. "Humanity actually hurt the swarm." Ambassador Chen appeared on the communication screen, her face tired but determined. "This isn't over, Chancellor. The swarm will adapt to what we did here. They'll come back stronger. But we proved something important." "What?" Zelthar asked. "That they can be beaten," Chen said. "Your people have been fighting a defensive war for 10,000 years. Fighting to survive, to maintain what you have. Humanity learned a different kind of warfare, fighting to win no matter the cost. The swarm thinks in terms of adaptation and overwhelming numbers. They don't understand spite. They don't understand revenge. And they definitely don't understand a species that builds weapons specifically to kill them." She leaned forward. "The debt is paid, Chancellor. Humanity stood when you expected us to run. We fought when you thought we'd be helpless. Now the question is, will the Confederacy keep treating us like children, Or will you finally see us as equals and let us help you win this war? Zelthar looked at the human ambassador for a long moment. This species that his predecessor had saved, that the Confederacy had protected and limited and viewed as inferior, they had just accomplished what the entire Confederacy couldn't do. They had made the swarm afraid. "What do you need?" he asked quietly. Ambassador Chen smiled. "Access to your military networks, full intelligence on swarm movements, and most importantly, stop trying to make us fight your way. Let us fight our way." "Your way is savage," one of the council members objected. "Uncivilized." "Yes," Chen agreed without shame. "And it works. You can keep your honor and your elegant warfare. Humanity will do what's necessary. We've already lost our homeworld once. We won't lose another." The vote was close, but it passed. Humanity was granted emergency military autonomy and access to Confederacy intelligence. The war had changed. The swarm had awakened something they didn't understand. A species that remembered being prey and had sworn to never be prey again. And in the darkness of space, human ships began hunting. The war room on New Terra buzzed with activity 24 hours a day. Admiral Marcus Chen stood at the central holographic display, watching colored dots represent the greatest conflict the galaxy had seen in 10,000 years. Blue for Confederacy forces, red for the swarm, and green for humanity's fleet. 3 months had passed since humanity revealed its hidden strength. 3 months of constant battle across a dozen star systems, and the green dots, Marcus noted with grim satisfaction, were pushing forward while the blue dots held defensive positions. "Admiral, we're receiving reports from the Epsilon front," Commander Rodriguez said, pulling up new data. "The swarm attempted to flank our position using the asteroid field. Captain Kim deployed the minefield strategy. Enemy casualties estimated at 4,000 ships. Our losses? 70 ships. Captain Kim's flagship was damaged but survived." Marcus nodded. 70 ships for 4,000. The mathematics of war were brutal, but humans had learned to calculate survival in cold numbers. The Velkara fought to minimize casualties. Humanity fought to maximize enemy losses. It was the difference between species that had known peace for millennia and a species that remembered extinction. "Admiral Chen," another voice called. It was Chancellor Zelthar's image appearing on the communication screen. "We need to discuss your fleet's tactics at Epsilon." "What about them?" Marcus asked, not looking away from the tactical display. "Your ships use civilian freighters as decoys," Zelthar said, his voice strained. "When the swarm engaged them, you detonated them remotely." "This is effective," Marcus interrupted. "The freighters were unmanned, remote-controlled. They drew swarm ships into the kill zone exactly as planned. 0 friendly casualties, massive enemy losses. It's deceptive. It violates the principles of honorable warfare." Marcus finally turned to look at the Chancellor. "Honorable warfare is why you've been losing for 10,000 years. The swarm doesn't care about honor. They care about consuming everything in their path. We give them what they understand. Death." Zelthar's expression showed pain and frustration. Over the past 3 months, this conversation had happened dozens of times. The Confederacy's military commanders were horrified by human tactics. Humans fought dirty. They used tricks, traps, and tactics that civilized species had abandoned millennia ago. But humans won. "The Council is concerned," Zelthar said more quietly. "Some members are questioning whether humanity is becoming as monstrous as the swarm." Marcus felt anger flash through him but kept his voice level. "The swarm destroyed Earth. They killed 9 billion of our people. They left our survivors homeless and desperate. You saved us and we're grateful. But don't mistake gratitude for weakness. We know what we're doing, Chancellor. We're fighting a war of extermination against an enemy that wants to consume all life. If our methods make you uncomfortable, look away. But don't ask us to fight with one hand tied behind our backs." The communication ended tersely. Marcus returned to the tactical display where Commander Rodriguez waited. "The Velkara don't understand," Rodriguez said quietly. "They can't understand," Marcus replied. "They've never been on the edge of extinction. Their wars are about territory and principles. Our war is about survival. Every human alive remembers the stories from Earth. We carry that fear with us, and we've turned it into rage." He pulled up a new sector on the display. "What's the status on the Gamma Nebula operation?" "Ready to launch in 48 hours. We've positioned 3,000 ships in the area. The swarm has concentrated a major force there. Intelligence suggests they're using it as a staging ground for an assault on the Cathar refugee colonies. Then we hit them first, Marcus decided. Send the order. Operation Gamma begins on schedule. The Gamma Nebula was a region of space filled with dust and ionized gas, beautiful and deadly. It interfered with sensors and communications, making it perfect for ambushes. The swarm had gathered a massive fleet there, over 200,000 ships, preparing to overwhelm the Confederacy's defensive lines. They didn't know humanity's fleet was already there, waiting. Admiral Marcus Chen commanded the operation from his flagship, the Indomitable. Around him in the nebula's interference, 3,000 human warships hung silent and still. Stealth technology borrowed from the Velkara and improved with human innovation kept them hidden. All ships report ready, sir. Captain Sarah Okonkwo's voice came through the command channel. She had been promoted to command of the assault carrier Independence, one of humanity's largest warships. At 82 years old, she showed no signs of retiring. The war had given her purpose again. Good, Marcus replied. He looked at his tactical officer. Enemy position? The swarm fleet is gathering at the nebula's core. They're preparing to move. Estimate 6 hours before they begin their assault on the Cathar colonies. We don't give them 6 hours. Send the signal. All ships begin Terran Gambit. What happened next would be analyzed by military historians for centuries. Human ships, instead of engaging in a traditional fleet battle, began moving through the nebula in a pattern that seemed random. Ships would approach swarm formations, fire a brief salvo, then retreat back into the sensor-distorting clouds. The swarm pursued, thinking they were hunting isolated ships. They were wrong. The human ships weren't running. They were leading. Each retreat brought swarm ships deeper into the nebula, into specific coordinates, and at those coordinates human engineers had spent the past week placing surprises, mines, thousands of them. Not elegant energy mines that the swarm had learned to detect. Simple, stupid, brutal chemical explosives attached to chunks of iron and rock, invisible in the sensor interference until they were right on top of you. The swarm fleet, pursuing what they thought were easy targets, sailed directly into minefields. Explosions blossomed throughout the nebula. Ships cracked and burned. The swarm tried to adapt, to pull back, but human ships were suddenly everywhere, cutting off retreat paths, driving them deeper into the trap. All ships, initiate Phase 2, Marcus ordered. Box them in. Human warships emerged from hiding surrounding the swarm fleet, not to engage in direct combat but to prevent escape. The swarm was trapped in their own staging ground, burning in a nebula filled with explosives. But the swarm had numbers. Even losing thousands of ships, they still had enough to break through. Swarm vessels began ramming human ships, accepting losses to create escape routes. They're going to break the perimeter in Sector 4, the tactical officer reported. Marcus checked the display. Sector 4 was held by a battle group commanded by Captain Williams. 25 ships against a swarm breakthrough numbering in the thousands. Williams, Marcus called on the direct channel.
Fall back.
Let them through. We can't hold that position. Negative, sir. Williams' voice came back calm and steady. If they break through here, they'll reach the Cathar colonies. Those refugees have children on those stations. Kids who survived the swarm once already. Marcus felt his chest tighten. He knew what Williams was about to do. Captain, I'm giving you a direct order. With respect, sir, my comm system seems to be malfunctioning. Can't quite hear you. Williams's voice held a grim humor. All ships in Sector 4, you heard the Admiral's plan. We hold the line. For Earth. For the Confederacy. For every species that can't fight for themselves. Marcus watched helplessly as Williams's battle group moved into a tight formation. 25 ships against thousands. What followed was a slaughter, but not the one the swarm expected. Williams's ships didn't try to fight conventionally. Instead, they did something only humans would think of. They weaponized themselves. Each ship maxed out their engines, accelerating to maximum speed directly at the swarm breakthrough. At the last moment, crews evacuated in escape pods. The unmanned ships, moving at incredible velocities, became kinetic weapons. When they hit the swarm formations, the explosions were massive. And the human ships had one more trick. Their reactors were set to overload on impact. 25 ships became 25 nuclear detonations in the heart of the swarm fleet. The swarm breakthrough was destroyed. Over 15,000 ships gone in less than 2 minutes. The escape pods carrying Williams and his crews were picked up by rescue ships hours later. When the battle ended, humanity had lost 600 ships. The swarm had lost over 120,000. The remaining swarm forces retreated, abandoning the Gamma Nebula entirely. The Cathar colonies were saved. The Confederacy Council called an emergency meeting. When Admiral Marcus Chen's image appeared, he was surprised to see not just military commanders, but civilians, scientists, philosophers, religious leaders. Admiral Chen, Zelthar began, what your forces did at the Gamma Nebula was unprecedented. We won, Marcus said flatly. The Cathar colonies are safe. The swarm lost their staging ground, that's what matters. At what cost? A Solari representative spoke up, her energy form flickering with emotion. We watched the recordings. Your ships, they turned themselves into bombs. They sacrificed themselves. And their crews survived, Marcus pointed out. Captain Williams, and every single person in his battle group made it back alive. Their ships were just tools. We used them to achieve victory. You're treating war as if it's only about victory, a Drovak elder said, his massive form hunched with age. War should be about achieving objectives while preserving life and honor. Marcus felt his patience snap. Honor? Honor? Where was honor when the swarm killed 9 billion humans? Where was honor when they consumed the Cathar homeworld? You want to talk about honor while species are going extinct? You're becoming the very thing we fight against, the Solari pressed. Violence without restraint, warfare without mercy. No, a new voice said. Everyone turned to see Captain Sarah Okonkwo's image appearing. With respect, you're wrong. The swarm kills for consumption. They destroy because it's their nature. Humanity kills for survival. We destroy because it's necessary. There's a difference. Is there? Zelthar asked quietly. Yes, Sarah said firmly. Because when this war ends, we'll stop. We'll put down our weapons and go back to building. The swarm will never stop. That's the difference between a soldier and a monster. Soldiers fight when they must. Monsters fight because they enjoy it. And do you enjoy it? The Solari asked. When you destroy swarm ships by the thousands, do you feel satisfaction? Sarah was quiet for a moment. Yes, she admitted. I do. Every swarm ship I destroy is payback for Earth, for my family who died in the invasion, for every human child who grew up without a homeworld. I won't apologize for that. The swarm made us victims. We refuse to stay victims. If that makes us monsters in your eyes, so be it. But we're monsters who are winning. The council chamber fell silent. Finally, a Cathar representative spoke. Her crystalline body reflected light in patterns that showed distress. My people lived on our homeworld for 40,000 years. The swarm consumed it in 3 days. Your methods frighten us humans, but they also give us something we haven't had in months. What? Marcus asked. Hope, the Cathar said simply. Hope that the swarm can be beaten. Hope that we might survive. Hope that someone in this galaxy knows how to fight and win. Over. The next weeks, more information came through intelligence channels. Human tactics were being studied by every military force in the Confederacy. Some species tried to copy them and failed. They didn't have the mindset for it. Humanity's advantage wasn't just technology or tactics. It was psychology. Humans fought like cornered animals because, in their collective memory, they had been cornered animals. But then, intelligence discovered something that changed everything. Dr. Tanaka appeared in Admiral Chen's office, her elderly face more serious than Marcus had ever seen. We found it, she said without preamble. Found what? The source. She pulled up holographic data. We've been analyzing swarm coordination patterns, the way they adapt so quickly across multiple star systems. It's not possible for evolution to work that fast, even for a species like them. There has to be a central processing node, a hive mind. Marcus leaned forward. You're saying there's a brain? A central intelligence controlling all the swarm ships? Not controlling exactly. More like coordinating, sharing information, instantly across the entire swarm network. Every tactic we use, every adaptation we force them to make, it all gets uploaded to this central node and distributed to every swarm ship in the galaxy. Where is it? Tanaka pulled up a star map. Deep in unexplored space, far beyond Confederacy borders, a region marked as the Void Sector. Here, our long-range sensors detected massive bioenergy signatures, and the swarm's communication patterns all trace back to this region. It's protected by millions of swarm ships, probably their entire reserve force. Marcus stared at the map for a long moment. If we destroy it, the swarm loses coordination. Every ship becomes isolated, unable to share adaptations or tactical data. They'd still be dangerous, but they'd be fighting blind. We need to present this to the Council. The Emergency Council meeting was the most heavily attended in Confederacy history. Representatives from every species, every colony, every faction gathered to hear humanity's intelligence report. The Confederacy has been fighting a defensive war, Marcus explained, showing the data. Holding lines, protecting territory, trying to minimize losses. That strategy will never work because the HFY swarm always has more ships. They breed faster than we can destroy them. What are you suggesting? Zelthar asked. An offensive, Ambassador Chen said. A strike directly at their coordination center. We end the swarm's ability to adapt. We cut off the head. That's suicide, a military commander objected. The Void Sector is defended by millions of ships. We'd need to send our entire fleet, leaving our worlds undefended. You'd need to send your entire fleet, Marcus corrected. Humanity will send 10,000 ships. We'll punch through to the target and destroy it. 10,000 ships against millions? That's not bravery, that's stupidity. It's the Terran gambit on a larger scale, Sarah explained. We won't fight. Their entire fleet. We'll break through at their weakest point, drive straight for the center and destroy it before they can adapt. Speed and aggression over defense and caution. The casualties will be catastrophic, Zelthar said. Yes, Marcus agreed simply. We expect 90% losses, maybe more. But if we succeed, we end the war. If we fail, we'll at least buy time for the Confederacy to strengthen its defenses. Why? The Solari representative asked. Why would humanity sacrifice so much for the Confederacy? You've made it clear you resent how we treated you. Ambassador Chen stood. Because 52 years ago, when humanity was dying, the Velkara came. You saved us when you didn't have to. You gave us a second chance. Yes, the treaty was restrictive. Yes, you treated us like children, but you saved us and humanity pays its debts. She looked around the council chamber. Every human alive knows we owe our existence to the Confederacy. This is how we pay that debt. We fight the battle you can't. We take the risks you won't. And maybe, when this is over, you'll finally see us as equals. The vote was taken. Authorization for Operation Prometheus, humanity's deep strike into the Void Sector. It passed unanimously. As the council adjourned, Zelthar approached Ambassador Chen. Your people are brave. Braver than we ever imagined. We're desperate, Chen corrected. And desperation makes you either cowards or heroes. Humanity chose heroes. I hope you survive this, Zelthar said quietly. So do we, Chancellor. So do we. The fleet gathered at Rally Point Omega, an empty region of space on the edge of Confederacy territory. 10,000 human warships, representing every military asset humanity had built over 50 years. From his flagship, Admiral Marcus Chen watched the assembled armada and felt the weight of what they were about to do. Final count confirmed, sir, Commander Rodriguez reported. 9,742 combat vessels. All crews reporting ready. Total personnel, 2.3 million. 2.3 million humans. 10% of humanity's total population, all volunteering for a mission where survival was unlikely. Marcus opened the fleet-wide channel. His face appeared on every ship's display, visible to every crew member in the fleet. This is Admiral Chen. In a few hours, we jump into the Void Sector. Most of you have seen the intelligence reports, you know what we're facing. Millions of swarm ships protecting their central coordination node. The odds are not in our favor. He paused, looking directly at the camera. I won't lie to you. Most of us won't come back. The statistical models give us less than a 10% survival rate. But here's what those statistics don't account for: human stubbornness. Our refusal to give up. Our ability to look at impossible odds and say, "Watch me." Across the fleet, crew members listened. Young faces and old, veterans of the new Terra, defense and fresh recruits who had never seen combat. All of them had volunteered. 52 years ago, humanity was hours from extinction. The Velkara saved us. They gave us a future when we had none. Today, we pay that debt. But more than that, we fight for every species in this galaxy that can't fight for themselves. We fight so no one else has to watch their world burn. We fight because someone has to, and we're the only ones crazy enough to try. He smiled slightly. Earth may be gone, but Earth's spirit lives in every one of you. We don't quit, we don't surrender, and we sure as hell don't go quietly. All ships prepare for jump. For Earth, for New Terra, for the Confederacy. Let's go kill a hive mind. The fleet jumped. The transition to the void sector took 6 hours. When the human fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel, they found themselves exactly where they intended, at the outer edge of swarm territory, and the swarm was waiting. Sensors detecting swarm contacts, the tactical officer reported, his voice tight. Initial count, 300,000 ships. Correction, 500,000. Correction. I get it, Marcus interrupted. There's a lot of them. Expected. All ships, tight formation, diamond wedge pattern. We're not stopping to fight. We're punching straight through. The fleet arranged itself into a massive spearhead formation, the heaviest, most armored ships at the front, fast attack ships on the flanks, the vulnerable command ships and carriers in the center. They began accelerating, building speed toward the heart of swarm territory. The swarm moved to intercept. The first hour was chaos. Swarm ships threw themselves at the human formation, trying to slow them down, trying to break the wedge. Human ships returned fire, but their primary objective wasn't to destroy the enemy. It was to keep moving forward, taking heavy fire on the port flank, Rodriguez reported. We've lost 40 ships in the past 10 minutes. Close the gap, Marcus ordered. All ships, maintain formation. Do not break formation to pursue targets. It went against every instinct, watching swarm ships fly past, being unable to chase them. But the mission required discipline. They had to reach the center. Everything else was secondary. The second system they passed through was worse. The swarm had had time to gather reinforcements. The human fleet had to fight through a swarm concentration numbering in the millions. Ships exploded on both sides, the vacuum of space filled with debris and radiation. Captain Sarah Okonkwo commanded her battle group on the fleet's starboard flank. Her ship, the Independence, shuddered as swarm weapons tore into its armor. Redirect power from life support to shields, she ordered. We only need to breathe for a few more hours anyway. Around her, ships were dying. The destroyer Defiant exploded, its crew of 800 gone in an instant. The cruiser Relentless, engines damaged, fell behind, and was swarmed. Sarah forced herself to look away. There was no time for grief. Only the mission mattered. Ma'am, we're detecting a swarm bio-titan approaching, her tactical officer reported. Mass equivalent to a small moon. Sarah pulled up the visual. The swarm bio-titan was massive, a living ship the size of a city, covered in weapons and armor that had evolved over millennia. It was moving to block the fleet's path. All battle group ships focus fire on that thing, Sarah ordered. Hit it with everything we have. 20 human warships concentrated their fire on the bio-titan. Nuclear missiles, kinetic rounds, energy, weapons, everything humanity had developed. The bio-titan's armor buckled and cracked, but it kept coming. It's not enough, someone said. Sarah made a decision. Independence to all nearby ships, I'm going to ram it. When I do, hit the impact point with everything you have. The explosion should crack its armor. Captain, that's an order. Sarah. Finished. Evacuation shuttles launch now. All non-essential personnel abandon ship. The Independence's crew scrambled to the escape pods. Sarah stayed on the bridge with a skeleton crew, all volunteers who refused to leave their captain. The ship accelerated, its engines screaming, but then another ship cut across their path. The heavy cruiser Thunderchild, commanded by Captain Williams, the same Williams who had survived the Gamma Nebula. "Not today, Captain Okonkwo." Williams's voice came through. "You're too valuable to this fleet. Thunderchild will take this one. All crew, evacuate. This is my last order." Williams, no. Sarah started. "Already done, ma'am. Tell my kids I was thinking of them. Thunderchild out." The cruiser accelerated past the Independence and slammed into the Bio-Titan at full speed. The explosion was massive, and as the Bio-Titan staggered, 20 human warships fired into the wound. The Bio-Titan broke apart, its massive form dying in the darkness. Captain Williams' escape pod was never found. The fleet pushed forward. System after system. Each one cost them hundreds of ships. By the end of the third day, the fleet had been reduced to 6,000 ships, then 5,000, then 4,000, but they were getting closer to the center. On New Terra, people gathered in public spaces to watch the news broadcasts. The Confederacy was transmitting updates every hour. Parents clutched their children, knowing that their fathers and mothers and siblings were out there, dying to give the galaxy a chance. Ambassador Chen stood in the assembly hall, watching the tactical displays with other government officials. Beside her, old Ambassador Chen Wei, now over 100 years old and kept alive by medical technology, sat in his wheelchair. "We're losing so many," Chen Lin whispered. "They knew," the old ambassador replied quietly. "Every person on those ships knew. They went anyway. That's what makes them heroes." On the fourth day, something unexpected happened. The Confederacy fleet arrived. Chancellor Zelthar's flagship, the Eternal Light, dropped out of FTL along with 5,000 Velkara and allied vessels. They positioned themselves at the edge of the void sector and began engaging the swarm forces that were chasing the human fleet. "Chancellor," Marcus said in surprise when the communication opened. "What are you doing here? Your orders were to defend the core worlds." Zelthar's face showed determination. "We watched your progress. We watched you fight and die for a mission we approved but didn't support with our own blood. That ends now. The Confederacy does not let its members fight alone." "This isn't your fight," Marcus said. "Humanity made it our fight when you chose to stand with us," Zelthar replied. "When you refused to run. When you decided that our survival mattered as much as your own. We will not let you die alone, Admiral Chen. The Confederacy fleet will hold this position and keep the swarm occupied. You get to the center. You end this." Marcus felt emotion choke his throat. "Thank you, Chancellor. Thank us by surviving. The galaxy needs humanity's courage." The Velkara fleet engaged the pursuing swarm forces, buying the human fleet time. It was a desperate battle. Elegant Velkara ships fighting with tactics they had refined over millennia, now fighting alongside the brutal efficiency of human warfare. The two styles complemented each other, the Velkara holding the line while human ships broke enemy formations. The human fleet, now down to 3,000 ships, pushed into the sixth system. And there, at its center, was the target. The hive construct. It was massive beyond comprehension. A structure the size of a small moon, but organic. Biological architecture that pulsed with energy. Billions of neural pathways visible on its surface, glowing with bioluminescence. This was the brain of the swarm, the coordination center that had made them nearly invincible for millennia, and it was protected by millions of swarm ships. "All ships," Marcus broadcast. "This is it. Final push. Diamond formation. Maximum speed. We're going right down their throat." The fleet accelerated. 3,000 ships against millions. The mathematics were impossible, but humanity had stopped caring about mathematics somewhere around day 2. The battle that followed was indescribable. Human ships fought with everything they had, knowing this was the last stand. Crews who had served together for years died together. Ships that had survived since the construction bays on New Terra met their end in the void sector. But they kept pushing forward. 2,000 ships. 1,000. 500. "We're not going to make it," Rodriguez said quietly, watching the tactical display. Marcus looked at the screen. The hive construct was still too far away. They were losing ships too quickly. At this rate, they'd be wiped out before reaching strike range. He made his decision. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen. Plan Alpha is no longer viable, switching to Plan Omega." Plan Omega was the final contingency, the plan no one wanted to implement, the plan where the ships themselves became the weapons. "All personnel, abandon ship. Every vessel is to evacuate all crew immediately. Navigation will be transferred to AI control. Ships will proceed to target on automatic." Across the fleet, crews scrambled to escape pods. Captains and commanders, officers and engineers. Everyone who had made it this far was now abandoning their ships. The vessels that had carried them across the void sector were about to become missiles. Sarah Okonkwo stood on the bridge of the Independence for the last time. Her crew had already evacuated. She was alone, ready to transfer control to the AI. "You've been a good ship," she said quietly, placing her hand on the command console. "Better than we deserved. Make this count." She left the bridge and entered her escape pod. Around her, hundreds of other pods were launching, carrying the last survivors of Operation Prometheus away from the battle. The AI-controlled ships formed a new formation. Tight, compact, every vessel aligned perfectly. They accelerated to maximum speed, then beyond. Emergency power was rerouted to engines. Reactors were pushed past safety limits. The ships began to glow from the heat, and they aimed directly at the hive construct. The swarm tried to stop them. Millions of ships converged, firing everything they had. Human vessels exploded by the dozens, by the hundreds. But there were still enough. 500 ships became 400, then 300. But 300 was enough. The human fleet, now unmanned and moving at velocities that would have killed any crew aboard, slammed into the hive construct. The impacts alone were devastating. Ships moving at relativistic speeds, each one carrying the kinetic energy of multiple nuclear weapons. But humanity had one more trick. Every ship's reactor was set to overload on impact. 300 nuclear detonations across the surface of the hive construct, all happening within seconds of each other. The biological structure, evolved over millions of years, simply couldn't withstand it. Cracks appeared, spreading across the surface. Neural pathways burned out. The bioluminescence flickered and died. And then the hive construct exploded. The shockwave expanded through the system, destroying everything nearby, swarm ships, debris, everything. The escape pods carrying the human survivors were far enough away to avoid the blast, but they felt the impact, saw the flash of light that marked the swarm's death. Across the galaxy, every swarm ship suddenly stopped. The coordination was gone. The shared intelligence was severed. Millions of swarm vessels hung in space, suddenly alone, suddenly unable to adapt or coordinate or even understand what had happened. The Confederacy fleet, still fighting at the edge of the void sector, watched in amazement as the swarm simply stopped fighting. Ships that moments ago had been attacking with perfect coordination now drifted aimlessly, their actions random and confused. "Target destroyed," Marcus Chen broadcast from his escape pod, his voice hoarse. "Hive construct is gone. Mission accomplished." On New Terra, in the assembly hall, people erupted in cheers and tears. The news spread across the Confederacy at light speed. The swarm was broken. The war was effectively over. But the cost was staggering. Of 10,000 ships that had entered the void sector, only 347 escape pods were recovered. Some crew members had been lost when ships were destroyed before evacuation. Others had been caught in the final blast. Many had simply disappeared in the chaos of battle. 2.3 million humans had entered the void sector. Only 82,000 survived. Chancellor Zelthar stood on his bridge, watching the recovery operations. Around him, Velkara ships were collecting human escape pods, giving medical aid, doing everything they could to save the survivors. "They actually did it," his second-in-command whispered. They sacrificed 96% of their force and still completed the mission. Zelthar nodded slowly. They are humanity. They endure. They persist. And they pay their debts in full, no matter the cost. He opened a channel to all human escape pods. Survivors of Operation Prometheus, this is Chancellor Zelthar. The Confederacy is bringing you home. You have won the war. The swarm is broken. The galaxy is safe because of what you did here. The debt is paid, and now the Confederacy owes humanity more than we can ever repay. In his escape pod, Admiral Marcus Chen closed his eyes and allowed himself to weep. For the friends lost, for the crews that would never come home, for the incredible, terrible, glorious thing they had just accomplished. The war was over. Humanity had paid its debt, but the price would echo through the generations. The journey home took 2 weeks. The Confederacy fleet escorted the human survivors every light year of the way, treating the escape pods like precious cargo. Medical ships attended to the wounded. Supply vessels provided food and comfort. And every species in the Confederacy sent messages of gratitude and respect. Admiral Marcus Chen rode in Chancellor Zelthar's flagship, recovering from injuries sustained during the evacuation. The burns on his arms and chest were being treated with Velcara medical technology, but the scars on his soul would take longer to heal. How many? He asked quietly one evening, as Zelthar visited his medical bay. The Chancellor understood the question. The confirmed casualty count is 2,218,000, 82,000 survivors. Another 40,000 are listed as missing, but they're dead, Marcus finished. Just no bodies to confirm it. Zelthar sat down beside the bed. In 20,000 years of Confederacy history, we have never seen such sacrifice. Your people gave everything. They gave what was necessary, Marcus said. That's what we do. When something needs to be done, we do it, no matter the cost. I owe you an apology, Zelthar said suddenly. We saved your species 52 years ago, and then we treated you like children. We put restrictions on you. We watched you and judged you and kept you contained. We thought we knew better. We were wrong. Marcus looked at the Chancellor. The proud, elegant being who had led the Confederacy through the war looked genuinely humble. You did what you thought was right, Marcus said. You saved us when we were dying. Yes, the treaty was restrictive. Yes, you underestimated us. But without the Velcara, humanity would be extinct. We don't forget that. But you resented it? Yes, Marcus admitted. We resented being treated as lesser. We resented the pity. But we also understood it. You'd never seen a species come back from the edge like we did. You didn't know what we were capable of. And now? Marcus smiled slightly. Now you do. And I think that terrifies you as much as it impresses you. Zelthar laughed, a sound like chimes. You're not wrong. The Council has been debating for days about what to do with humanity now. Some are afraid. They saw your tactics, your willingness to sacrifice. They worry what such a species might do with unrestricted power. And what do you think? I think, Zelthar said slowly, that the galaxy needs humanity, not as pets or children, but as equals, as protectors. Because when the next threat comes, and it will come eventually, we will need species who remember how to fight, how to endure, how to win. News of the fleet's approach reached New Terra days before their arrival. The entire planet prepared for the homecoming. Cities draped buildings in memorial colors, black for the lost, green for the survivors, gold for the victory. People gathered in the millions, waiting to see the heroes return. Ambassador Chen Lin stood at the spaceport, her hands clasped in front of her. Beside her was her grandfather, old Ambassador Chen Wei, now 103 years old, the original survivor of Earth's fall, watching humanity's triumph. They're coming, someone announced. The first ships appeared in the sky, not human vessels, but Confederacy escorts, and behind them, the precious cargo of escape pods, each one carrying survivors of Operation Prometheus. But what came first stunned everyone watching. A corridor of honor. Every species in the Confederacy had sent representatives. Velkara ships, Cathar cruisers, Drovak carriers, Solari vessels. Hundreds of ships from dozens of species, all arranged in two perfect lines stretching from the edge of New Terra's orbit down to the atmosphere. A corridor of military respect, honoring the fallen and the survivors. As the human escape pods passed through, every Confederacy ship fired a salute. Not weapons, but light displays and energy blooms. A cascade of color and light, a memorial and celebration combined. People on New Terra watched the sky fill with brilliant displays. Many wept. Everyone felt the weight of what those lights represented. Recognition, respect, equality. The escape pods landed, and the survivors emerged. They looked exhausted, haunted by what they had seen, but they also looked proud. They had done the impossible. Captain Sarah Okonkwo stepped off her pod and onto New Terra soil. She was 82 years old, one of the oldest survivors of the U mission. Her legs almost gave out, but Ambassador Chen was there to support her. "Welcome home, Captain," Chen said, tears streaming down her face. Sarah smiled tiredly. "Did we do it? Is the swarm really gone?" "They're gone. Scattered across the galaxy in isolated pockets. No coordination, no adaptation. The Confederacy is hunting down the remnants. It's over, Sarah. We won." Sarah closed her eyes and took a deep breath of New Terra's air. Somewhere behind her, other survivors were being reunited with families. The sounds of crying and laughter mixed together, joy and grief inseparable. Admiral Marcus Chen stepped off his pod to find his entire family, waiting. His children, his grandchildren, even his elderly grandmother who had survived Earth's fall. They embraced him, and for the first time in weeks, Marcus allowed himself to feel something other than the weight of command. "You did it, grandson," old Ambassador Chenwei said, his ancient voice steady. "You paid the debt our generation incurred. You made humanity equal to the species that saved us." Marcus looked at his great-grandfather. "The cost was high," Wei agreed. "But worth it. Freedom always costs. Respect always costs. You paid in blood so that humanity could stand tall. Never forget the price, but never regret it either." 3 weeks later, the Confederacy Council held a formal session. Every species was represented, and for the first time in history, the chamber was packed beyond capacity. Everyone wanted to witness this moment. Chancellor Zelthar stood at the center. "We are gathered to address the matter of humanity's status within the Confederacy. 52 years ago, we accepted them as protected members under the Treaty of Preservation. That treaty no longer reflects reality." He gestured to Ambassador Chen Lin, who stood representing humanity. "The Treaty of Preservation is hereby dissolved. Humanity has proven themselves beyond any doubt or measure. They fought when we could not. They sacrificed when we hesitated. They saved not just themselves, but every species in this chamber." At the memorial, an elderly woman placed flowers at the base of the black stone monument. She was the great-granddaughter of one of the fallen, a child born after the war, who had never met her ancestor but carried their legacy. A young Velkara officer stood beside her, also paying respects. "My grandfather served with the fleet that escorted humanity home," he said. "He told me stories about the human survivors. He said he had never seen such courage." The human woman smiled. "My great-grandmother's last message before the battle was simple. Tell my family I love them. Tell the galaxy we fought for them. That's who we are. We fight for those who can't." "And the galaxy is grateful," the Velkara said. "We learned from humanity, not just how to fight, but why to fight. What's worth defending." They stood together. In silence, two representatives of species that had once been savior and saved, now simply friends. Above New Terra in orbit, a joint patrol flew past. Human warships flying alongside Velkara cruisers, Cathar scouts, and Drovak carriers. Mixed crews, combined tactics, shared purpose. On the lead human ship, the destroyer Remembrance, a young officer named Chen, great-great-grandson of Ambassador Chen Wei, stood on the bridge. Beside him was his co-commander, a Velkara named Kelvarson, grandson of the cultural liaison who had first welcomed humanity. "Patrol route looks clear," Kelvarson reported. "No threats detected." "Good," young Chen replied. "Let's keep it that way." They worked in easy partnership, the kind that came from decades of cooperation. The awkwardness was gone. The condescension was gone. All that remained was respect, friendship, and shared purpose. In the officers' lounge, crew members from 6 different species played cards and shared stories. A human engineer taught a Cathar pilot an Earth card game. A Drovak medic shared food from his homeworld with curious humans. A Solari navigator helped a young human learn advanced mathematics. This was the future humanity had bought with blood. Not just survival, but belonging. Not just existence, but purpose. On New Terra, at the memorial, the sunset painted the sky, in shades of gold and red. The names on the black stone monument gleamed in the fading light. 2,218,000 names, 2,218,000 sacrifices. But those names had meaning. They had bought peace. They had earned respect. They had transformed humanity from a species on the edge of extinction to the defenders of an entire galactic civilization. The inscription at the monument's base reflected the sunset's light. They were saved by mercy. They repaid it with sacrifice. The debt is eternal. The friendship, everlasting. Below it, someone had placed fresh flowers. They placed flowers every day, a tradition that would continue for generations. Because humanity never forgot. The debt was paid, but the memory was eternal. And in the stars above, human ships flew, alongside their allies ready to defend the galaxy they had saved, not as the saved species but as equals, as friends, as the shield of the Confederacy. The galaxy had stood silent before humanity's might, and then it had stood together, united by sacrifice, strengthened by friendship, protected by those who knew the true cost of freedom. The debt was paid, the war was won, the future was bright, and humanity, the species that had stared into extinction and refused to blink, stood watch over it all, ensuring that no species would ever face the darkness alone again. The galaxy learned that day, and every day after, that humanity never forgot a debt, and when they paid it in full.